The Kamiq is Skoda's smallest SUV out of the three that they sell here in Australia, but it straddles the light and small classes that we have officially down under. That means it's a little bit bigger than the smallest in the class, such as the Volkswagen T-Cross, but it's a little bit smaller than larger vehicles such as the Mazda CX-30 and the Kia Seltos. And yet this boxy little SUV fits in really nicely between those two classes, offering compact exterior dimensions with a really spacious cabin. But its starting price of $36,990 drive away is a little bit steeper than a lot of its competitors. However, that gets you a really very nice 1.5 litre turbo petrol 4-cylinder engine making 110 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters of torque, and a hell of a lot of technology and clever practical touches that we'll get into in just a minute. So does that mean the Kamiq is one of the best small SUVs on sale in Australia? I reckon it is, but it only accounts for less than 2% of the market share right now. As of December 2021 and into the first quarter of 2022, there aren't that many Australians opting for a Kamiq. Why is that? Well, that's what we're going to find out in today's independent review of this range-topping Signature Edition, which costs $42,990 drive away. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Kamiq down below, so leave your opinions down there. And if you haven't done so already, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to the Chasing Cars YouTube channel. So the Kamiq may not have the chic coupe styling of a Mazda CX-30 or a Toyota CHR. It's got quite blocky proportions, but I happen to think that suits this car rather well. And as we'll get to in a second, it really pays off inside. It also ties it into Skoda's Kodiaq, Kamiq, Karoq range really nicely. They're all a little bit boxy and slab-sided, and here, finished in red, I think it looks really good. But I'd love to hear your opinion, of course, down below, because this is all subjective. Now, you can tell this Signature apart by a little bit of extra chrome and these silver finished 18-inch alloy wheels, where the other $41,990 Monte Carlo, the sportier flavored grade, gets a different set of alloy wheels and a little bit more of a black pack out the front, including on the grille. Now, of course, it's not all about exterior design, though I do like the silver roof rails, and I said the proportions of this car are really cool. Long wheelbase, short overall dimensions, 4.24 meters long with a 2.65 meter wheelbase, so it's quite generous inside, but also it's about the clever touches that Skoda loves doing, including thoughtful touches like these umbrellas in the doors that sit in there until they need to be used, and they have their own little sheath, pop them away, and you almost never know you're there. And I think that shows how deeply Skoda's design philosophy runs to being pragmatic, sensible, and clever. Now let's check out the boot. Before we follow up the umbrella with more practical touches, I just want to mention a couple of nice styling touches back here. Firstly, these tail lights, which look basic from a distance, but when you get up close, they've actually got this sort of spider-webby design in them. It looks really nice and crisp and special. You've also got the spaced out lettering that we're seeing on all Skoda models now, and there's no real way of telling this Kamiq apart from the other models in the range, apart from the fact that you spent a little bit more money to get this Signature, and you've got nice chrome lettering, which I happen to really like, but as we know, Ponch would like a black pack on this, but that's who the Monte Carlo is for. So anyway, let's pop this standard power tailgate. Why you need a power tailgate on a small SUV, you could argue it's not necessary, but it's just a nice thing to have. It also beeps once when it gets to the top. You might be able to turn that off. You can let me know if I'm doing it wrong down below. But it opens up to reveal a 400-litre boot, which is really spacious for this class and is bigger than something like a Volkswagen Golf or a Hyundai i30 by about 10 to 20 litres compared to a regular small hatch. And I think that's a really great thing for a small SUV. It is a slightly odd shape. It's quite short yet very tall, and you do have a bit of a load lip, but it doesn't sacrifice you having a decent spare tire option. It's not a full-size spare, but it's also not a full-on space saver that you're limited to 80 k's an hour on. It is a real Goodyear tire, an efficient grip. It's just a little bit narrower and a little bit bigger in sidewall than the 18-inch wheels that are fitted to this car. So nice little balancing act there where they've maximized boot space without sacrificing safety and other practicalities. Other neat touches include these storage cubbies off to the side, one raised mezzanine one up here as well, and of course we've got the reversible boot floor with a rubber mat that says Kamiq on it. If you want to have your dogs or muddy boots back there, you can just flip it over really nicely. You've also got very sturdy feeling shopping bag hooks, and although the finishing isn't quite as nice as you'd see on a Volkswagen competitor, it is still really decent and feels solid. And then of course, you just press the button, walk away and close it. There's no lock button back there, which is one small complaint, but apart from that, the Kamiq's boot is fantastic. Oh, and you can fit 36 soccer balls in there. Now, the Skoda Kamiq may be a fairly expensive light SUV at its $42,990 drive-away price for this signature edition, but that's not to say it doesn't deserve that price, because the cabin actually feels very high quality for a vehicle of this size and in this class. Certainly, even though you can see some of the hard points that you'd see in a Volkswagen Polo or a T-Cross light SUV, the Skodaification of this vehicle is really successful, and it makes it feel just that little bit more upmarket, and I really love to see that. Things like these really comfortable semi-leather, semi-suede suede cloth appointed seats, get electric adjustment for the driver, 10-way, including up and down, in and out lumbar, and under thigh tilt. All of that sort of stuff is perhaps not what you would have expected to see on a light car or a light SUV a couple of years ago. You also get just nice touches, such as these soft door materials, nice comfy armrest, and a feeling of solidity and quality to the plastics. Even though some of these trims don't feel as squishy or as soft as in other more expensive, more upmarket vehicles, they actually have a really nice texture to them. The Skoda sort of texture that you find in a base model Octavia just adds a little bit of lifting to this interior. And then you've obviously got this lovely steering wheel, which is the right size and looks really visually light and is lovely to hold with its perforated leather appointments. It just feels classy and airy. We do have the optional panoramic sunroof here in this car, which doesn't actually open, but it is more of a glass roof than an actual sunroof, but it adds a real sense of airiness to this cabin, and it means that the backseat passengers are going to be really comfortable and probably not get travel sick on longer car trips, but we'll come back to that in a second. Back to the technology package in here. We've got a 9.2-inch touchscreen. The more expensive range-topping vehicles such as the Monte Carlo and this Signature get the bigger touchscreen. The base car just gets an 8-inch, but even that's not too small in this class. The 9.2-inch is really crisp, easy to interact with, and as of 2022, after this car's launch in 2020, you now get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless as standard. Great, super easy to interact with. You can run your maps, your music system, or you can easily swap between that and the Skoda's own infotainment stuff, and it's all crisp and looks pretty decent. No, it's perhaps not as cutting edge as some other competitors, but really it's got absolutely everything you need, really responsive and nice to use, and a good array of shortcut buttons on either side. No, there's no physical volume knob, but you do have really easy to see plus and minus volume buttons there, and the controls fall easily to hand on the steering wheel. This sort of slightly knurled knob here does the volume for your infotainment, skip track, and all that sort of thing. It all falls nice and neatly to hand. Of course, we've got that 10.25-inch digital driver's display. It is a little bit smaller than the flagship Volkswagen display, but it still shows a map in this model equipped with navigation, and that works brilliantly. It's got all of these really nice to interact with screens, and you can see everything you need to in there. As for where the rest of the controls are laid out, I do have a slight issue with the HVAC controls. So they are physical to a certain extent. You've got your off and your climate control, so your actual temperature gauge, and you've got dual zone climate in here, recycle button, and defroster settings and auto, but you can't control fan speed straight from this menu. It's an issue we've seen before with this sort of Skoda infotainment system. It's not quite integrating everything into the screen, but it's not leaving everything there. So you have to press menu and then interact with this slightly strange looking menu here, press off to manual, auto, whatever you need to do. Once you get your head wrapped around it, that's okay. And to be honest, the auto setting works really well, so it's actually not much of an issue. Now, coming to storage, we do have a slight issue because we have a manual handbrake, which I personally really like, but it does rob the center console of some of the nicer storage touches we're seeing a little bit more of. You do have 2.5 cup holders, perfect for a little takeaway coffee cup, European sized. A little bin down here, which has a flock lined bottom, but hard plastic outside. It's good for a phone or sunglasses or something like that. Little 12-volt socket in front of there. And then we've got a really well thought out wireless charging pad ahead of the slightly old school gear shifter, because it's got rubber edgings to it, so your phone doesn't slip and slide out of there when you're going quickly around corners. And I think it's really good to see Skoda paying attention to that extra little nuance that not all manufacturers do. You've also got 2 USB-C charge ports there for nice fast charging or physical connections with the infotainment system. In the door bins, we have plenty of space for a 1-litre camping bottle in there, or a 700ml. You could probably fit a 1.5-litre soft plastic bottle if you really wanted to, but they unfortunately aren't flock lined, unlike you'd see in more expensive Volkswagen products or even more expensive Skoda products. And we would have loved to see that on this small vehicle. But still, finally, let's finish off on the really nice design flourish, which are these door handles. They feature on a lot of Skoda products, including the Octavia as well. They have this sort of shadow chrome design color here in this vehicle, and I think it just adds that final little touch of class to this vehicle to make it feel like it really is worth that $42,990 that Skoda are asking for at driveaway here in Australia. Throughout the years, we have been a little bit disappointed with a lot of the rear seats of small SUVs, but the Skoda Kamiq is not one of those cars. This, although it is a little boxy looking on the outside, really pays dividends on the inside because at only just over 4.25 meters long, there is so much space on offer here in the back seat of the Kamiq, and it is really impressive. It would mean that this car would fit into a family lifestyle really easily, I reckon, because everything from the amount of headroom that you have for me at 6'2", the amount of legroom behind my driving position, heaps of toe room as well, really nice and supportive bench also, and reclined but without being sort of gangster lean spec backrest, and then you've got this great view out, like almost as good as a Subaru Forester, and you saw how well that car did in our midsize SUV mega test if you've watched it. And a lot of that came down to the fact that it was just so easy to live with from the back seat because you have this great view out. You can see straight over the front seats and between them as well. They're not too obtrusive. And then the window line's actually nice and low, so you can see right out. Even with this privacy glass on the Signature Edition Kamiq, you've got plenty of visibility out, and I think that's going to be great for stopping kids being car sick. You've also got pretty decent materials back here. It's the same leather that you get in the front seats. You do have heating as well, 2-stage heating for each outboard seat, which is great. The only real shortcomings are the lack of flip down center armrest, and also the materials do go scratchy in the back here on top of the doors, and the door handles look a little bit cheap, but at least the spot where you rest your arm on the outside here is nice and softly padded to put some of those issues at rest. Also, the sunroof doesn't really impede headroom at all, even in the middle seat, which is broad and quite comfortable even for me at 6'2", and I reckon you could get 3 people across here pretty well. Of course, you've got adjustable air vents back here, no separate climate zone, but the ability to just pop it in your face if you want or not is great to have, and 2 USB-C fast charging ports that really finish off this back seat rather nicely. The boxy shape of the Skoda Kamiq means it's super easy to fit the children's seats in the back of this car. No, it's not comfortable or really even possible to sit in between the 2 seats, but as you can see in the front passenger seat with the rear-facing child seat behind me, I've actually got a super comfortable position here. I could sit in here all day long, all the way from Sydney to Melbourne, absolutely no qualms at all, and I think that's a bit of a win for a small SUV. One of the main reasons you might consider a Skoda Kamiq in this segment are its low running costs. It may not get the frugality of a Toyota CHR hybrid or a Yaris Cross hybrid for that matter, or have the cheap servicing of a Honda HR-V, but as a package with decent amounts of grunt, it offers really low fuel consumption. So 5.6 litres per 100 kilometres is the official ADR claimed consumption for a combined test route, and in our testing we saw 5.7 litres per 100 k's on a combined loop that prefaced highway driving. Now on its long-term average, including lots more city use, it's sitting about 6.9 litres per 100 k's, which I reckon is pretty decent for a small SUV. Servicing is done at 12 months or 15,000 kilometre intervals, and Skoda will sell you a care plan that extends to up to 7 years for $2,100 to cover all this car's maintenance. And if you choose to go for that 7-year care plan, the warranty that's normally 5 years or unlimited kilometres will be extended to 7 years and unlimited kilometres, matching a Kia Seltos. And I reckon that's a pretty great peace of mind, especially for a slightly more complex turbocharged European vehicle. As for insurance, the median Budget Direct customer over the last 12 months paid $768 to comprehensively insure their new Skoda Kamiq. Your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your driving history, your age, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So, the Skoda Kamiq has those funky looks, looks really cool in this red colorway, and has some great, delightfully thoughtful interior touches that just make it oh so Skoda. But really what matters about this small SUV is how it drives, because at the end of the day, that's really what you're going to be doing in a car most of the time. And I'm happy to report that all of the great Volkswagen Group bits coming together in this Skoda product mean it is a real joy to drive, not just out here on a country road, but also around town, where its size and just sort of visibility really works to its advantage. But before we get to that, let's discuss the engine. What's under the bonnet of this Kamiq 110 TSI? Because although it wears the same badge as the Golf Mark 8, it's actually a different engine. This is the 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder engine, not the 1.4. So it's the newer engine, and that's why its fuel economy rating is better. It's also coupled with a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. So this is kind of the flagship small car engine. It's not the forgotten developing world engine that we get in the Golf here in Australia, which is really great to see in such a small product that is really quite affordable. It's the exact same engine and gearbox combination as you're going to get in the Audi A3 Sportback, itself costing, you know, nearly sort of $55,000 once you've got it on the road in A3 33, 35 TFSI base model form. So you get all of that in this 42,990 little Skoda, and that's pretty cool. Only sends its powers to the front wheels, but that's not a big deal in a small SUV because it's not really got any delusions of actually being off-road capable. It just has that extra raised ride height, so the idea being that you get a slightly more comfortable ride, and if you do need to go off-road, you've got more clearance. It's not like you're going to be able to get over tricky, muddy obstacles at all. But this engine and gearbox combination is really sweet and lovely. It feels definitely more refined than the older 1.4 litre engine, a little bit less gravelly in its operation, really nice and quiet out here on the road, and always decent amount of power and torque. Most of it's in the mid-range. The 250 Newton meter torque peak is all there, sort of between 2.5 and 4,500 RPM. And it does great work in conjunction with a swift and slick DSG gearbox. It is not the 8-speed auto ACEN that you get in the Golf, and I think it's all the better for it. I know a lot of people don't love DSGs and their way that they work, but I happen to be quite a large fan, especially once you get your head wrapped around its slight idiosyncrasies, for example, taking slightly longer to engage reverse when you're parking. Once you're sort of up and out on the road and even around town, the DSG gearbox just works an absolute treat, and it gives better fuel economy numbers as well. Now to the chassis of the Kamiq, because it's based on the MQB A0 platform. So it's a Volkswagen Group light / small car platform underpinning the Skoda Scala and vehicles like the Volkswagen Polo as well. And here it's got equipped with a simple torsion beam rear suspension setup and a strut type front suspension, and it just works really nicely. It feels like a very faithful small car. You can have fun with it out on the open road as well. A cheeky little lift mid-corner will see the back end rotate really rather nicely and faithfully, and it allows you to actually enjoy this small SUV on a twisting country road. It feels more like a hatchback in the way that it drives rather than an actual SUV, and to me that's a good thing for a small SUV. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, it's not quite as plush as the softest in this class. For example, a Hyundai Kona is definitely a little bit more plush. This car rides with a little bit of extra firmness. Perhaps that's down to its 18-inch alloy wheels fitted with these Goodyear Eagle tyres, which are quite a firm, sporty choice for a car like this. But again, that sort of suits the way I drive and the way I like to engage with the car, so I have no problem with Skoda doing that. But of course, down the track as they wear out, you will be able to replace them with a tyre that's a little bit more comfortable and perhaps has a little bit more NVH isolation, because it feels like the car itself is really well refined. It's just that sometimes on a bit of coarse chip road at over 100 k's an hour, these tyres do create a little bit of roar into the cabin, but again, it's not really a big deal. This is really nicely refined small SUV as far as these things go. And to add to that, the visibility out of this car is fantastic. You can probably see the sunroof above me. It's optional, but it does let in so much light, and the entire car just lets in so much light. It's got a real boxy stance, and that means you don't have any blind spots to worry about, really. It's not like a Mazda CX-30 where you're constantly trying to fight that rear three-quarter blind spot that comes from the coupe styling. Instead, you can just see pretty much everything in this car, and that's really awesome in my book. It means it's a really easy SUV to live with around town, and you don't so much need to rely on the safety aids, though they are here, so you can use them, and they work really nicely. As standard, it's got adaptive cruise control and things like forwards AEB with pedestrian and cyclist detection and rear cross traffic alert. You can pay a little bit more money, as has been done in this car, to get blind spot monitoring, which is called side assist in Skoda world, and it all just blends together really rather nicely. And cap rating for this thing is 5 stars as of 2019, and stuff like the lane keep assist works really sweetly in practice out in the real world. And yeah, it's really hard to go past this Skoda Kamiq in terms of a driving experience for a small SUV. That punchy turbocharged engine, really refined driving aids, and enjoyable chassis mean that it is probably still the best small SUV that you can buy on the market. But I can't really say that with true confidence without us holding a small SUV mega test. So if that's something you want to see, make sure you let me know in the comments section down below, because I reckon that could be a really, really fun and interesting video to compare all of this car's competitors and see which one comes out on top. Now, I must admit, I'm rather smitten with this little Skoda Kamiq, but putting my personal enjoyment aside, objectively, this car is actually a really complete small SUV. It's so well packaged. It manages to jam so much cabin space into a really nice and compact footprint, and you know we love that at chasing cars. It straddles that light and small SUV segment really nicely, offers great fuel economy and a nice modern engine. Is the Signature the pick of the bunch? Well, at $42,990 drive away, it is still fairly expensive, and at the ambition end of the spectrum, you do still get a whole load of value with the Kamiq. So I would really implore you to come and check this thing out if you're looking in this segment against vehicles like the Subaru XV, Hyundai Kona, and Toyota CHR, because this adds a lot more sort of thoughtful touches that are really nice and I think would make it lovely to live with. But of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Skoda Kamiq in the comments section down below. Is it a car you've considered or did consider and ended up buying, or is it one that you skipped out on for a particular reason? I'd love to hear it in the comments section down below. While you're down there leaving your opinion, I'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to Chasing Cars if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you for watching.